There are some voices you never forget. Not because they were everywhere for years, but because the first time you heard them, they stopped you in your tracks. Jonathan Antoine was one of those voices. A shy teenager walked onto the stage of Britain's Got Talent in 2012, standing beside his friend Charlotte. He looked nervous, quiet, unsure. The audience didn't expect much. Even Simon Cowell raised an eyebrow. But then Jonathan opened his mouth, and within seconds, the entire room changed. A voice that powerful from someone so young, it felt impossible. He became an overnight sensation. Millions watched the audition. Millions replayed it. His life changed in a single evening. Fame arrived fast, loud, and overwhelming. Interviews, tours, headlines, expectations. The world suddenly knew his name. But then something happened. The spotlight moved. The headlines slowed. The excitement faded. And people started asking a quiet question. What really happened to Jonathan Antoine? Was it pressure? Was it heartbreak? Or was it something deeper, something the public never fully saw? Because behind that unforgettable voice was a young man trying to grow up while the entire world watched. Trying to understand himself while millions formed opinions about him. Trying to hold onto confidence while cameras searched for flaws. If you remember that first performance, if his voice ever gave you chills, then take a moment right now to like this video and subscribe to the channel. It truly helps more than you know. Because Jonathan Antoine's story didn't end after Britain's Got Talent. In many ways, that was only the beginning. And what happened next, the pressure, the silence, the transformation, is something most people never fully understood. Let's go back to where it all started. Before the stage lights. Before the standing ovations. Before millions of views. Jonathan Antoine was just a quiet boy growing up in England. He wasn't the kind of kid people expected to become famous. He didn't walk into rooms demanding attention. He didn't act like a future star. In fact, by many accounts, he was the opposite. Shy, reserved, and far more comfortable keeping to himself than being in front of crowds. School wasn't always easy for him. Like many teenagers who feel different, Jonathan struggled with confidence. He loved music, but loving something deeply doesn't always make social life easier. Being passionate about classical singing as a teenager can set you apart in ways that aren't always kind. There were moments when he felt judged. Moments when he felt like he didn't quite fit the mold of what people expected. And for a young person, those feelings can grow heavy. But there was one place where everything felt different: music. When Jonathan sang, something changed. The nerves faded. The self-doubt quieted. His voice carried strength he didn't always feel in everyday life. Teachers and family began to notice. There was something unusual there, not just talent, but emotional depth. Music became more than a hobby. It became a refuge. His family supported him, encouraged him. They saw how singing gave him confidence and purpose. They saw that when he performed, he became someone more secure, more certain. Not arrogant, just grounded in a way that only music seemed to provide. Then came a friendship that would change everything. Jonathan met Charlotte Giaconelli while studying music. She was confident, energetic, and loved performing just as much as he did. Where Jonathan was shy, Charlotte was outgoing. Where he hesitated, she encouraged. They balanced each other in a way that worked naturally. They began singing together. At first, it was simple. School performances, practice sessions, small stages. But their voices blended beautifully, her bright tone paired with his powerful classical style. People started paying attention. Teachers suggested opportunities. Friends encouraged them to take things further. And eventually, someone mentioned Britain's Got Talent. For many young performers, that kind of suggestion feels like a dream. For Jonathan, it also felt terrifying. The idea of stepping onto a massive stage, in front of judges and millions of viewers, was overwhelming. Confidence doesn't appear overnight, even when talent is obvious. But Charlotte believed they could do it. And slowly, Jonathan began to believe it too. They auditioned together as a duo. Just two teenagers with big voices and even bigger nerves. They didn't walk in expecting fame. They walked in hoping to perform well and maybe, just maybe, be heard. They had no idea that within days, the entire world would know their names. Jonathan wasn't chasing celebrity. He was chasing music. But sometimes, when the world discovers a voice like his, it doesn't give you time to prepare. Everything was about to change. The stage lights were bright. The theater was packed. And standing there in front of the judges, Jonathan Antoine looked like any nervous teenager facing a moment far bigger than himself. He stood beside Charlotte, hands slightly tense, posture unsure. The judges asked a few questions. Charlotte spoke confidently. Jonathan answered softly. There was a pause, the kind that often comes before an audition begins. From the outside, it didn't seem like anything extraordinary was about to happen. Simon Cowell looked skeptical. Not cruel, just unsure. Two teenagers singing classical music didn't exactly scream viral sensation. The audience waited politely. Some expected a pleasant performance. Nothing more. Then the music started. Jonathan took a breath. And when he began to sing, the room changed instantly. The voice that came out didn't match the nervous teenager standing there. It was powerful, controlled, emotional. It filled the theater in a way that demanded attention. Conversations stopped. Judges leaned forward. The audience reacted almost immediately. By the time he reached the first major note, people were already clapping. Charlotte sang beautifully too, but there was no denying the shock that Jonathan's voice created. It wasn't just good for his age. It was genuinely impressive. Mature. Operatic. Confident in a way that seemed to appear only when he sang. Simon Cowell's expression shifted. A raised eyebrow turned into surprise. Surprise turned into a smile. By the end of the performance, the audience was on its feet. Standing ovation. Cheers. A moment that would be replayed millions of times online. In just a few minutes, Jonathan Antoine went from being an unknown teenager to a global viral sensation. The audition spread across the internet almost instantly. Social media lit up with reactions. News outlets shared the clip. Viewers around the world were moved by the contrast. A shy young man with a voice that sounded far older and far more confident than his appearance suggested. Overnight, everything changed. Interviews started coming in. Television appearances followed. Fans began recognizing him in public. For someone who had spent most of his life feeling shy and uncertain, the sudden attention was overwhelming. Exciting, yes, but also intense. Fame doesn't arrive gently when it comes through viral television. It arrives fast, loud, relentless. One day you're practicing in school. The next, millions of people have opinions about you. Jonathan and Charlotte advanced through the competition, gaining more fans each week. Their performances were strong. Their popularity grew. And while they didn't win the season, they achieved something just as powerful: recognition. Record deals followed. Tours were planned. Opportunities opened up that most young singers only dream about. But with those opportunities came pressure. Sudden fame can feel like standing in the center of a storm. Everyone wants something. Everyone is watching. Every performance matters. Every interview gets analyzed. And for a teenager still figuring out who he is, that level of attention can be both thrilling and exhausting. Jonathan was grateful. He loved singing. He loved performing. But the pace of everything left little room to process what was happening. One moment he was a student. The next, he was a public figure. And public figures don't always get the luxury of growing quietly. The world had discovered his voice. But very few people stopped to ask how he was feeling. Because behind the applause, behind the headlines, behind the viral success, Jonathan Antoine was still just a young man trying to find his footing in a life that had suddenly moved much faster than he ever expected. The audition had changed everything. And the journey ahead would be far more complicated than anyone could see at the time. After Britain's Got Talent, life didn't slowly change for Jonathan Antoine. It accelerated in a way few teenagers are ever prepared for. There was no gentle transition. No time to sit and reflect. One week he was rehearsing in familiar classrooms. The next he was traveling, performing, doing interviews, and being recognized in public by strangers who felt like they already knew him. Fame doesn't knock politely. It arrives all at once, and for Jonathan, it came during one of the most vulnerable stages of life, late adolescence. He and Charlotte released music together. They performed across different stages. Fans loved them. Audiences were supportive. On the surface, it looked like a dream come true. But behind the applause, the pace of everything was overwhelming. Schedules filled quickly. Media attention followed them everywhere. And with attention came commentary. Not all of it kind. Jonathan had always been shy. Sensitive. Someone who found comfort in music rather than in public attention. Suddenly, he was in front of cameras constantly. Every performance was analyzed. Every appearance was discussed. Even his physical appearance became a topic of conversation in the media and online spaces. For a young person still forming confidence, that kind of scrutiny can feel heavy. It's one thing to perform. It's another thing to feel like the world is evaluating you as a person. He handled it with as much grace as he could.
He smiled. He sang. He thanked fans.
But internally, the adjustment was not simple. Fame can be isolating, especially when it arrives before you've fully figured out who you are. He wasn't just singing anymore, he was representing an image.
A story. A brand.
And when you're young, that pressure can feel confusing. You want to stay true to yourself, but you also want to meet expectations. You want to grow, but you feel like millions of people expect you to stay exactly as they first saw you. Jonathan loved performing. That part never disappeared. But the noise around it, the interviews, the opinions, the expectations, began to weigh on him. He wasn't a naturally extroverted personality.
He didn't crave constant attention.
And yet attention surrounded him at all times. There's an emotional cost to that kind of spotlight. For many viewers, he was the boy with the incredible voice. But for Jonathan himself, he was still just trying to grow up. He was learning about the music industry while still learning about himself. Learning about contracts, touring schedules, public perception. All things that can overwhelm even seasoned adults, let alone someone so young. And while fans celebrated his success, very few people saw the quieter side of what he was experiencing. The pressure to maintain momentum, the fear of disappointing audiences, the challenge of holding onto confidence while being constantly evaluated. From the outside, Jonathan Antoine's life looked impressive. He was recording music,
performing,
traveling. Fans continued to support him. His voice remained powerful and expressive. But inside, he was dealing with something far less visible: the challenge of confidence in the face of constant public attention. Confidence is complicated, especially when it develops in front of millions of people. Jonathan had always been somewhat shy. Fame didn't magically erase that. If anything, it amplified the pressure. When you know that every performance might be recorded, shared, and discussed online, the stakes feel higher.
There were expectations.
Expectations to improve. Expectations to look a certain way. Expectations to maintain the magic people first saw. And expectations can be heavy. He worked on himself, both vocally and personally.
He trained, practiced, focused on growth.
But personal growth doesn't always happen smoothly when it's happening in public view.
There were moments of self-doubt, moments of reflection,
moments when the pressure felt intense. He had to navigate criticism, praise, and everything in between. Learning how to separate his identity from public opinion wasn't easy. Many young artists go through similar struggles, but not all of them do it under such a bright spotlight. For Jonathan, every step forward felt observed. Every change felt noticed.
Still, he kept going. He kept singing, kept performing,
kept trying to become more confident in himself, not just as a performer but as a person. And that kind of internal work often happens quietly,
without headlines,
without dramatic announcements. Just a gradual effort to feel stronger and more comfortable in one's own skin. It wasn't a scandal. It wasn't a collapse.
It was a human process. But it was real.
As the years passed, Jonathan Antoine began focusing on transformation. Not just musically, but personally. He wanted to grow,
to evolve,
to become more confident and more comfortable in his own identity. And part of that journey involved physical and emotional changes that fans began to notice.
He worked on his health.
He focused on fitness. He dedicated time to self-improvement. Weight loss became part of his journey, but it wasn't just about appearance.
It was about confidence, energy,
feeling stronger on stage and off. For someone who had faced public commentary about his looks early in his career, taking control of his own transformation was meaningful.
It wasn't instant.
It wasn't easy. But it was gradual and determined. Alongside those changes, his voice continued to mature. He trained extensively, explored different musical directions,
refined his style.
Moving from teenage sensation to adult performer required adjustment, and he approached it seriously. He released solo albums,
performed internationally,
continued building a career that was no longer defined solely by a reality show audition, but by ongoing work and dedication. Reinvention is rarely dramatic. It's usually quiet,
consistent, intentional.
And for Jonathan, it was about becoming the best version of himself, not the version people expected from years earlier. For a lot of viewers, Jonathan Antoine still exists frozen in time, the shy teenager on a talent show stage, surprising the world with a voice no one expected. That image is powerful, but it's also incomplete. Because life didn't stop after that moment. It kept moving, quietly and steadily, even when the headlines faded. Today, Jonathan is no longer the nervous boy people first saw. He's an adult artist who has spent years refining his craft, working on himself, and building a career that doesn't rely solely on a viral audition from the past. He continued releasing music, continued performing, continued growing vocally and personally. His sound matured as his voice deepened and strengthened with age and training. Classical crossover remained central to his identity, but his performances gained emotional weight as he lived more life beyond the early spotlight. One of the most noticeable changes over time was his confidence. In earlier years, interviews showed a soft-spoken young man who sometimes seemed overwhelmed by attention. In more recent appearances, there's a sense of calm. Not arrogance, just steadiness. The kind that comes from surviving the chaos of early fame and realizing that you don't have to rush everything. He also focused heavily on personal health and transformation. His physical changes became visible to fans over the years, but those changes weren't about impressing anyone. They were about feeling stronger, more comfortable, more in control of his own life. That kind of transformation takes discipline and patience, and it doesn't happen overnight. As his public visibility shifted, something else happened too. His life became quieter. Not silent, just less chaotic. He still performs for audiences who appreciate his voice. He still records music. But the constant frenzy that followed his first audition isn't there in the same way. And for someone who always valued privacy and stability, that quieter pace seems to suit him. There's a misconception that when a celebrity isn't constantly trending, something must have gone wrong. But that's not always true. Sometimes, it simply means they're living a more balanced life. Working without the pressure of constant viral attention. Creating without the noise of endless commentary. Jonathan Antoine didn't disappear. He adjusted. He moved from sudden, explosive fame into something more sustainable. Something calmer. Something more grounded. Fans who have followed his journey closely know that his voice never left. It continued to develop. Continued to move audiences. Continued to carry the emotional sincerity that first made people stop and listen. And perhaps that's the most important part of where he is today. He's still singing. Still doing the thing that gave him confidence when he needed it most. Still using the voice that changed his life, but now on his own terms. He isn't defined by one audition anymore. He's defined by years of growth that came after it. When people search for what really happened to someone who once dominated headlines, they often expect a shocking revelation. A scandal. A collapse. A dramatic turning point that explains everything. But Jonathan Antoine's story isn't built on scandal. It's built on something quieter, and in many ways more relatable. The so-called tragedy isn't a hidden event that destroyed his career. It's the emotional reality of growing up too fast in front of millions of people. It's the pressure of being labeled a prodigy before you've fully figured out who you are. It's the challenge of carrying expectations that were formed when you were still a teenager. Sudden fame can create an illusion. From the outside, it looks glamorous, exciting, rewarding, and it can be. But it can also be disorienting. When you go from anonymity to global recognition almost overnight, your identity can feel tied to a moment you didn't have time to process. For Jonathan, that moment was his audition. The world met him at a very specific stage of his life, shy, young, and unexpectedly powerful as a singer. People connected with that image. They held on to it. And as he grew older, he had to navigate the space between who he had been and who he was becoming. That kind of transition is rarely dramatic enough for headlines, but it can feel intense on a personal level. Confidence doesn't appear instantly. Self-acceptance takes time. Learning to handle public attention without letting it define you takes maturity. He experienced pressure. He experienced scrutiny. He experienced the emotional weight of early fame. But he also experienced growth, resilience, transformation. The tragedy, if there is one, isn't about downfall. It's about how difficult it can be to carry the expectations of millions while still learning to believe in yourself. It's about how the world sometimes moves on quickly, leaving young stars to find their footing in a quieter space afterward. Jonathan Antoine didn't collapse under that pressure. He adapted to it. He kept singing, kept improving, kept building a life that feels more stable than the whirlwind that began it. And maybe that's the real story people don't always notice. Not every journey from sudden fame ends in disaster. Some evolve into something calmer, more sustainable, more human. He's still here. Still performing. Still growing. The boy with the voice no one expected became a man who learned how to live with both applause and silence. And in that balance, between who he was and who he is now, lies the truth behind what really happened. It wasn't a shocking tragedy. It was a quiet, complicated, deeply human journey. And in many ways, it's still unfolding.